Can Utah prove the Big 12 doubters wrong in 2024? And Utah has a great opportunity to make a big statement against a Big 12 foe in early September. Also, Caleb Lohner turning a couple heads at fall camp. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we'll cover your team every day. If you're in the market for a second listen, Locked On College Football, Locked On Big 12, have everything you need to know about the game we love so much. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by Gametime. You can download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. That's Locked On College for $20 off on your first purchase. Terms do apply. My name is JT Wistricll, and on today's special Locked On Utes, got an opportunity to sit down with Cam Stuart of Locked On Baylor, and we have just talked about Utah's transition into the Big 12. We talk about, hey, there's a lot of hype around this Utah football team. Why does that hype exist? Can they actually go out there and get it done? We also talk about the opportunity Utah has against Baylor. I think it's a fantastic opportunity to put the Big 12 on notice. No, Baylor is not a powerhouse program, but you hear so much about Utah can't play with these Big 12 teams. Baylor, even though they're supposed to be in the middle of the conference, if Utah can really go in that first game and throttle the Bears, I think that will make a couple of the teams just go, okay, this, and the national media in particular go, okay, the doubters that will realize this Utah team is for real. And then we close with a fun discussion on Caleb Lohner, as some recent reports have come out on him and what he's been able to do in fall camp. So hope you guys enjoy this episode of Locked On Utes.
JT Wistricll, Locked On Utes, joining the program to preview what some people are calling the odds-on favorite to win the Big 12, the Utah Utes. So JT, my first question to you, as we are looking towards the beginning of this season, we've entered into fall camp. How is life in the Big 12 treating you?
I mean, Utah fans are excited. I mean, the schedule, the players that are back for Utah, Kyle Whittingham's potential final season, there's a lot of excitement and hype around this year for Utah. And I think this team has a great chance to win the Big 12 this year. I think they deserved that top spot ranking. I can definitely understand Big 12 fans' frustration for Utah not being there. One thing I had forgotten about until the coaches poll dropped is that Utah is the highest ranked team that did not finish last season ranked. I forgot that Utah did fall off a cliff, so they weren't ranked at the end of the season. But why did Utah's fall off a cliff at the end of last season? Injuries. And what was their biggest injury? Cam Rising. When Cam Rising was healthy, this offense averaged 38 points per game in 2022. That cratered to 23 last season. And this year, you get Cam Rising back. You have Brant Kuithe back. He has 2 600-yard receiving seasons under his belt. And look, in college football, I know Cam Rising, Brant Kuithe, those guys are old. Brant's first over 600-yard receiving season was in 2019. So he's been in college a very long time. But experience, we've seen that win out and work, right? Think about Bo Nix, Michael Penix. Those guys dominated a lot of their opponents last year because of how prolific they were as passers. So when you look at this Utah team, the amount of players that are back because of the COVID rules from even the 2021 Pac-12 championship team is incredible. So I'm really excited for this season. Utah's got a big target on their back because of them being picked number one. I know some of the fans have made people mad. I'm sure I've even given some takes. Maybe the one I just gave made some people mad, but I am really excited to see if this Utah team can live up to the hype.
Yeah. So, okay. You outlined it really well there, and 2 touchdowns a game. That's a massive difference. I mean, make no mistake. So is it that simple of Cam Rising, who we know is a tremendous player, but is it that simple in today's quarterback heavy college football age that not having him makes Utah from an unranked team to one that's top 15 and projected to win a major conference? That simple?
For me, yes, and I'll explain why. Because this is Kyle Whittingham's Utah football team. Most teams, you would be like, let's say Josh Heupel at Tennessee, right? Offensive-minded head coach. They're still going to throw the ball and be aggressive. Kyle Whittingham is a defensive-minded coach. I've watched Kyle over the years literally tank certain offensive possessions because he does not want to risk turning it over. Utah would run the ball on 3rd and 9 last year. And that's the reason I'm going bald, because I pulled out all my hair last year watching Utah run it on 3rd and 9 so many times. But like, one of their backup quarterbacks was Nate Johnson. He's going to start at Vanderbilt this, or maybe start at Vanderbilt this year. His best attribute was a runner. Utah refused to let him run because he had a fumbling problem for a few games. So they were content with, hey, I know we're down by 7 right now, or like even 14 at one point, but it's like, we're going to take the chance and continuing to try to run it and break through. So this Utah offense was just really conservative with their play calling last year. They were not aggressive because Kyle Whittingham was like, we do not turn it over. And why was the play calling not aggressive? They didn't trust the quarterback. Kyle Whittingham has routinely called Cam Rising, who he more than trusts, one of the best leaders he's ever been around. They are going to let Cam Rising take the reins of this offense. They have recruited Dorian Singers, a former 1,000-yard receiver. Didn't work at USC last year, but 2 years ago at Arizona, he was on fire. Utah sold him on a vision. They sold Damian Alford, who was averaged 19 yards per catch at Syracuse before he transferred to Utah. He sold those players on a vision to come into Salt Lake City to play for this Utah team. Utah's going to be more aggressive this year, and Cam Rising is the difference. Cam Rising is never a quarterback who is going to be all over SportsCenter's top 10 each week. But you know what he does? He delivers in the biggest moments. It's why Utah won back-to-back Pac-12 championships. It's why he went toe-to-toe with Caleb Williams and won. I don't think he was better than Caleb Williams that day, but there were plays that needed to be made in the second half. Cam Rising pretty much always rises to the occasion. And I'm not even trying to make a pun.
That was so good, though. That was so good.
But you look at that, you look at the success this team's had, the defense, and they got their guy back. This offense changes when Cam Rising is under center because the coaches trust him. So you're right. In most cases, it'd be like, is it really realistic for them to get back up there? Most teams, probably not. With Utah, because of how differently I've seen them call a game, when they have confidence in their quarterback, Utah would tell you that 100% of the playbook was not being used last year with Bryson Barnes there. It was with Cam Rising, and it will again this fall. And when Cam has played his full 2 seasons, and that's all he's actually played. He's only played 2 full seasons. Incredible. I know he is. Yeah. He first arrived on campus in 2018, but because of injuries and transfers and all that, really only 2 seasons. When he's played a full season, Utah's been conference champions both times. And we can talk about Utah's schedule a little bit more later in this episode if we want. I think this schedule really sets them up to be once again conference champs in their new conference, the Big 12.
Yeah, we will get into the schedule and why that's not such a cocky statement that you just made. But talking about that quarterback, because I think we saw that last year in the Baylor Utah game. It was a battle of backups. It was a rock fight, man. I mean, we're sitting up there thinking, like, how is Utah going to compete until Cam Rising gets back on the field? And obviously, it was a struggle all season, and we really saw a microcosm of that in that week 2 game in Waco. And looking at that, I ask you, because you kind of touched on it a little bit there, what does Utah's offense look like when the playbook is open and Cam Rising is under center? You mentioned it's not 4 vert, spread the ball out necessarily, but the efficiency was there. You talk about 37, 38 points a game. That's a top line offense right there. And you don't usually see that unless it is with that kind of scheme that is known for putting up that many points. So what does this team look like when they're firing on all cylinders and number 7 is under center?
Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app, they actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. They have fantastic last-minute deals, all-in-price views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Gametime truly takes the guesswork out of buying tickets, and they have so many wonderful features that make it an easy process. Whether it's that low price guarantee where Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference, how about you get a panoramic view from your seats in the app before you buy? And that all-in pricing, which features allows you to show your total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. That's not even mentioning some of the flash deals and zone deals where you can pick your seat or let Gametime choose the section and choose the seat for you for less. So you can take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, capital LO, and all of college capitalized for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. And the capital LO and college is all capitalized, no spaces, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Also want to talk to you all real quick about something special we have going on, and that is our second listen of the day. Want to thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen of the day, but for your second listen of the day, you can enjoy friend of the show, Locked On College Football's Spencer McLaughlin, breaking down everything on Locked On College Football. He gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron with discussion on the upcoming season and the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, including conference realignment, the transfer portal, NIL, the new college football expanded playoffs, and more. Locked On College Football is available on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Definitely want to establish the run. Even with Cam Rising there, it's a big thing for this Utah team, and they're a zone-heavy scheme. I'm very curious. The offensive line is the biggest question I have for Utah. They have high recruits. They have players I think that will gel, but there's just more proven commodities at other spots, so I expect them to still have that success establishing the run. But that's the first thing they want to do. And then once they can establish the run, that's where the play action pass game gets going. And because you're so used to Utah running it, once they hit you with that play action, it's like, oh, wait, they're actually throwing it. Utah also loves to attack the middle of the field because what do they have in the past? And well, even this year, they have had some of the best tight ends in the country. Dalton Kincaid is at a solid rookie season with the Bills. I think he's going to be a superstar. He was a superstar at the collegiate level. Like I said, with Brant Keith, he's at 2 600-yard receiving seasons, and that's rare for tight ends to have that type of production. So this Utah team loves to use the tight ends too. And then they have receivers that make a few plays each game. Now, what excites me is it just seems like Utah is, because of how many weapons this team has and some of the questions I have with the running game, I think there's reasons to expect this offense to, the ratio to be 50-50, or I could even see like 55-45 actually in favor of the pass this year because of how many talented guys they have that can win on the outside. I mentioned some of those proven commodities that have had success at the Power 5 level, and this tight end room is absolutely, I mean, just like it's not just Brant Keithy. Carson Ryan was a starter at UCLA last year, and Landon King, I only had 182 yards last year, but like just watched some of the catches and like even in practice, like that's just a guy I think is gonna explode. So the biggest thing with Utah is zone heavy run scheme, play action pass, but they're also going to air it out more this year because they have difference makers finally on the outside. And Cam Rising didn't come back just to play dink and dunk football. He's going to want to be aggressive. Utah's got the players to do it. I think this Utah offense has a chance to be special, and that's without me mentioning that run defense only lost one player, and last year they were top 5 as a rushing defense. In the run defense is the front 7 was overall. They only lost one player from that front 7 as a part of that top 5 run defense from a year ago.
Oh, were they that good? I just didn't know if Baylor was just that bad at running the ball. Probably a little bit of both. Probably a little bit of both. But looking at the elephant in the room here, which is the schedule. No doubt Utah is one of the strongest teams on paper in the conference. But I think what is leaning a lot of people towards picking them in it is the schedule to go along with that. And I'm looking at it now. We get the warm up of Southern Utah before a good in-state rivalry before taking on Baylor and then heading out to Logan. Ooh, grudge match there. At Oklahoma State is the end of September. That I think is the toughest road game on the schedule. Arizona at home, at Arizona State, TCU at home, at Houston, the big rivalry at home, at Colorado, home at Iowa State, and at UCF. So JT, I have picked Utah unofficially on this podcast several times to win the conference this year, mainly because of that schedule. Again, no disrespect. We know it's a good team still, but with that schedule. So why am I wrong in putting so much into the schedule? Or am I wrong? Is there something I'm missing here? Is Utah just better than everyone else in the conference?
I think that this Utah roster, in my opinion, is the best in the conference. But it's also just, there's also really good teams. Like you could say Kansas State has the best roster. You could say Oklahoma State has the best roster. There's other teams you could pick. I think Utah's the best, but I don't think it's clearly that Utah blows everyone out of the water. So if we got a lot of other good teams, what can we look for after? Well, how does the schedule set them up? When we're talking about the top 4 teams in the Big 12, the consensus has been, and Arizona sometimes gets roped in there, right? But the consensus often is in some order: Utah, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, and Kansas. Utah completely misses Kansas and Kansas State. Those are literally two, any way you want to slice it, top 5 teams. What's this Utah team also really good at? Because this is where we can bring Arizona back into it. They're really good at home. Utah has lost one true home game since 2018. Lost one in 2020 as well because of the COVID year. That lone loss was last year to a Bo Nix. So your Heisman finalist was the one who went into Rice-Eccles Stadium and diced Utah up. So it takes a special quarterback to be able to go in there and do it. It's just really hard to win when you factor in the altitude. Utah Stadium isn't one of the largest capacity-wise in the country, but the way it's structured, it traps in the sound. And also, because of the altitude, even though these guys are in world-class shape, you get fatigued, you get tired. And what happens when you're fatigued and tired playing against athletes who are comfortable playing in that environment? It's not usually good things. So you'll see teams that maybe after the first quarter, like Utah got off to a slow start, but then, why is the defensive line for the other team starting to wear down? Oh, offensive line keeps false starting because, when you're getting fatigued, it usually happens to the big guys first. So that's something that we see a lot. So this home field advantage is really good for Utah. Utah has one game on their schedule they shouldn't be favored in my opinion, and it's at Oklahoma State. And I like some of the things about the Oklahoma State matchup for Utah too, in terms of what did I mention? That run defense that Utah has is incredibly impressive. Ollie Gordon's really good, but when you pack the box, it gets tough sometimes. And I just think
make Alan Bowman beat you. Oof.
Yeah,
that could be good for the Utes.
Exactly. So yes, that's going to be a hard game for Utah to win. By far the most likely on their schedule they lose. But there are things about that game where I'm like, okay, I feel good about that matchup. I feel better about that matchup on paper of, okay, we can slow down Ollie Gordon than I do with Utah cornerbacks that I think can be good, but that have to hang with Shedeur Sanders, who's going to be able to place those balls in elite positions to talented receivers. Utah should beat Colorado. They're clearly a better team, but that's a matchup where I'm like, ooh, I don't like that matchup as much as I'm like, okay, I feel better about that Utah front seven going against Ollie Gordon. But after Oklahoma State, what's the second toughest game on the schedule? Because I know Iowa State could be good, but I just told you how hard it is to win inside Rice-Eccles Stadium. So maybe they could do it, but I've seen teams clearly better than them on paper that haven't been able to. So to me, the next toughest game is at UCF. I think anyone who says, I say Utah 11-1 has been my schedule prediction. And for some people to go, that's crazy. In 2019, they played 0 ranked teams and they only had 1 loss in the regular season. I expect Utah to play 2 to 3 ranked teams on this schedule based on when they play them. And because a lot of those games could come at home too, it's just, I don't expect Utah to lose those. So I see 3 losses at most on this fully healthy Utah team. That's what the potential is to me. And I definitely think there's a potential where they go 11-1. I'm not saying undefeated because that's just too hard in today's era of college football. But this is a talented roster. They're well coached, and they got a chance to make history in the Big 12 this fall.
And as much as I would love to disagree with you, JT, I think 11-1 is not crazy. I really don't. And I know that that's been a point of contention with the schedule has with fan bases of some other teams at the top, like you mentioned, like a Kansas State, and Oklahoma State. But look, that's the way it goes, way she goes. And one of the important games is obviously week 2 against Baylor at home, which you've reminded me is a very, very tough place for visitors to win. We kind of talked about it earlier. It was such a weird matchup last year. Neither team had their quarterback. It was, Utah was expected to be a top 10 team. Didn't quite work out that way. Baylor was supposed to be a halfway decent team, and it didn't work out that way. So looking at that matchup this year, is there something, I don't want to say chip on the shoulder, but something to prove from a Utah standpoint of we let this thing get too close last year. We're playing them at home. We're trying to make this a bloodbath.
I think if I'm Utah, this isn't even as much about last year's game. This is about, I know it's technically not their first conference game.
True.
This is our first conference game. Let's leave an impression. Let's really take it to the Bears. Let's prove we're one of the best teams in the conference. Let's prove why Rice-Eccles Stadium is so hard to play out too. And, players find things to motivate them, right? Maybe there are some people who are I've seen some Baylor fans where I talk about hey, that game was close. And, Baylor actually had some success running on Utah in the first half. Yeah. But then in the second half, Utah made some adjustments and had some players start to kind of just play better too, because what do we just talk about with why it's tough to play at Utah? It's a new environment. The Texas Heat. The Heat is something Utah's really struggled in. Look back on 2022. They played Florida. That was one of Anthony Richardson was fantastic in that game, and Utah couldn't tackle him to save their lives because players were clearly fatigued in the heat. And that was something that also took its toll on Utah and sometimes last year is being fatigued in that heat. And that's where Utah lucks out this year too, is they don't have those games in the crazy heat, right? That game at Oklahoma State on September 21st, it could be decently hot, right? But then you get into October at Arizona State, that's even a night game. So your next road game is at Houston on October 26th, like in Texas. That's not that hot by that point in the season. So that's where Utah lucks out there. But getting back to what we were talking about with Baylor, to me, this is an opportunity for Utah to make a statement early against a Big 12 opponent. Baylor's got some positive things, but there are obviously a number of questions, hence the difference in preseason media rankings. I think this is going to be a very tough game for Baylor to win. And for those of you, once again, that listen to me and you're like, this guy's full of crap, like it's not going to be that way. We can at least go back to this. We've seen where Utah is. They're pretty much unanimously on the top 15 of these top 25 rankings. I haven't seen Baylor popping up on most of them. So that's where I'm just saying it's going to be a very tough game for the Bears.
Look, the teams that beat Baylor also receive votes. So there's clearly some sort of effect. It's like war in baseball or something. I don't know. But looking at, because I need to give my people some hope here, JT. I know you know that. I need to throw a bone here. So you've talked about the strengths of Utah. What is something in terms of this team that you're thinking like, oh, that's a question mark, or actually I don't really like this position group, or if a team does this against Utah, I don't feel great about it?
So with Utah, I feel good about the state of all their positions. You feel better about some, right? Like obviously Cam Rising. I feel really good about Cam. Questions about his health, sure, but feel good about Cam. Mention those receivers. I have questions about this offensive line. There are talented players on there. There's a good coach in place. There have been NFL offensive linemen literally the last 2 years in a row. Utah's had an offensive lineman drafted to the NFL. So the development is good there. But the offensive line was a weakness last year. So it's like, okay, can some of these players improve in their new spots? Are these new players going to rise up? And they weren't a bad offensive line, but they weren't the standard. The prior 2 years in a row, Utah was in that top final 15 for the Jim Moorhead Award. Last year, they were not, nor did they deserve to be based on their play. So questions about the offensive line, but talented players with good coaching, talented recruits. I expect it to be pretty good. The other one is the secondary. They lost Sione Vaki and Cole Bishop. But the problem, with that one, for me being overly concerned, is I think Morgan Scalley and Sharif Shaw are two of the best coaches. If you look at Utah's, why do we feel good about Alabama and Georgia each year, regardless of who they lose? Because it's Alabama and Georgia, and they consistently bring in elite great players, right? That's Utah's secondary constantly put guys into the NFL. So I feel really good about the players in place. And I saw some of those guys play at an extremely high level when given an opportunity in the bowl game. So based on the history and of Utah's defensive backroom, I feel pretty confident that they're going to be good. I just have some questions about the offensive line, because some of the guys last year, I was like, okay, you guys were solid, but in a roster that I think, as I said, is the best in the conference, I do not think this is one of the best offensive lines in the Big 12. And it maybe would be top. I think it has a chance to be top 5 at the end of the year, but I don't think based on right now that they should be there. And games are won and lost in the trenches. So that is where I will say, especially early on in the season, as they're working out of communication, this is by far the first real test they will have faced, because as we mentioned, Southern Utah is not going to be. Last time Utah played Southern Utah, I think it was 73-10. So that one isn't exactly going to be a good barometer for how it's going to shake out there. But this is a Baylor team that, look, still has lots of pieces on it that are positives. But there is, of course, a chance that Baylor can come in and win inside Rice-Eccles Stadium. It's just going to be really hard based on what we've seen in the past and what I've seen these talented Utah players do against a team in a similar position to Baylor. But especially if Utah, I don't think they'll do this, but if they're reading the press clippings about how good they are and they come out flat, Baylor jumps on them early, that's where anything can happen, right?
I mean, yeah, that's why we roll the footballs out there, right? Exactly. And I will say, for Baylor fans, I wish I could tell you the pass rush was great and was just going to blitz them all night against the suspect offensive line. Not the case, but they do have some quick new linebackers out on the field there this year who I think could get to the passer, which I would be excited about. And the resurgence of the star position, hopefully in this year, will bring some speed to the pass rush as well. And Baylor's going to be airing it out, unlike they have the last few years. Now that might not take right away, but the benefit is there's not going to be a lot on tape right away. So if those corners aren't quite up to speed yet, there could be some big playability for Baylor, which seems crazy to say after the season they had last year, that there's a big playability from this team. But I do believe in Daquan Finn and this offense that Jake Spavital will bring. I do need to ask about maybe not specifically that Baylor game, but yes, the Baylor game and throughout the season. You do have a former Bear on the team. And you Baylor fans will not remember him in shoulder pads. You will remember him, missing rebounds and dribbling the ball off his foot, but then playing great in the Big 12 conference tournament in Kansas City, because that is former power forward Caleb Lohner, who is coming to play tight end for the Utes, which you've already said is a stacked position room for them. But you said you have an update on our man, Caleb Lohner.
I do. Look, there, and we heard a little bit about Caleb in terms of the very first week. Cam Rising said, look, he's a big target. He's got a great, he could leap out the gym. So we're excited to get him rolling up here. And then this week, Joel Coles of the Deseret News, who's a site that covers Utah here, this is what he tweeted out on his X account. Tight end Caleb Lohner was the last player off the field at practice today, staying late while working with the jugs machine. Freddie Whittingham, Utah's tight end coach, praised his hands last week, and Lohner certainly looks the part of a football player in pads. 6'8" and a bulked up 250 pounds. That's impressive measurements right there. Love to hear that he's staying on the field, working hard. There's just one big problem for Caleb Lohner. As I said earlier, I think this might be the best tight end room in the nation. And what have all those players done? Produced at the collegiate level, played this position for years, refined their route running. Yeah. That might be, that's just the biggest thing to me. Like just played. It's just so hard to just drop in and do this. To me, this move for Caleb is more so getting himself trained and prepared to be an undrafted, to potentially lock on as an undrafted free agent with an NFL team. I just don't see why he, against Southern Utah, sure, he might play late, but there's just so many good tight end this Utah team has. I just don't see a position where you're going to pick it up that quickly. I think Lohner will contribute more on the basketball court than he will on the football field. That's my personal feel on this whole situation. I would love it if he broke through. Good for him. He worked hard. A quick funny story on Caleb Lohner. When I was a student at Utah in 2019, I want to say, I think it was my sophomore year I was up there. I passed Caleb Lohner on his visit when we all thought he was going to become a Ute. And then he actually went to BYU instead, and then went to join you guys at Baylor like that. So it's funny that he made his way back to Utah, but I'm excited to see just how I love a guy with potential. So maybe he breaks through and plays. I just think it's really hard because Utah has definitely two guys who've gone over 200 yards receiving. Another guy in Landon King, who I told you I was high on, and literally has been torching some of Utah's cornerbacks. And I don't think it's because those cornerbacks are poor. I think it's just how good Landon King is. So I just don't. And even Dallin Bentley, it's that's the fourth string guy. Utah's their blocking tight end. I have a hard time seeing the path for Caleb Lohner to play meaningful snaps on a Utah football team that is, for a reason, projected inside the top 15. But it's a fun story, and if he can make it out on the field, and I don't doubt his work ethic, right? He's still a Division I athlete, so I'm sure he's putting in the time, but it's going to be really hard for him to get out there.
I almost feel bad for him in that, like you mentioned, almost any other place at the Big 12, he's higher up on the depth chart or has more of a chance to play at that position. And he's 6'8", man, little sneak on a red zone play, a goal to go situation. It's almost unstoppable, but you've got NFL tight ends ahead of him. So that might be tough. Before I get you out of here, JT, I've got plenty of everydayers that do the road trips, and don't take any offense to this. They loved going to BYU a few years ago. I think that's just because they love the state of Utah in general. We all flew into Salt Lake, so we love that too. So I know there's going to be some people that listen every day that are out there at Rice Eccles in September. I went to a killer Chili's there, but let me know some of your recommendations, maybe a food spot before or after the game, probably a night game. So before the game, where would you have them go?
It's a great, unfortunately, with the way Utah's campus is structured, it's it's uphill, it's on the side of them. We call it a hill. It's uphill. It's called, it's mountains. It's gorgeous stadium, but there's not a lot of places on campus, but I'm trying to figure out where. The pie is really good. That's a pizza shop that I really like a lot out there too. That the burger place I'm thinking of is not close by the stadium, so I'm just going to stick
that anyway.
What'd you say?
They might like that anyway, venturing out.
Cotton Bottom Burger. It's a little burger joint. I think that is fantastic too. Oh, there's a Hawaiian barbecue place. I really like Hawaiian barbecue, so I would highly recommend finding a Hawaiian barbecue place. I think it's LL Barbecue or something like that. But look, it's a great place to watch a game because of the mountains. Utah is a beautiful state, so I'd highly recommend all of you guys, if you can, to make it out there like that. And hopefully the Bears can prove me wrong and it's an entertaining showcase for Baylor. But either way, I hope you guys enjoy, those of you who will be making the trip out to Salt Lake City. It really is a fun state.
Oh man, I would love to get out there again. I'll probably end up at Chili's, but Hawaiian barbecue sounds good. We Texas, we'll try other barbecues. We'll say Texas is better, but we'll try other barbecues.
I will say to redeem myself with your listeners a little bit. I played my high school football in Texas, so I do think Texas is the best high school football state, and I think Texas has the best barbecue as well.
You're darn right, man. Do you want to share where you played so people can? You might have some.
I played at Wakeland High School.
All right, man.
So I actually had the running back my senior year, Colby Delishaw. I think he walked on at Baylor as well too, like that. So shout out Colby wherever you are. But yeah, played a little bit out there. Never got to play. And then my team was fine, not too crazy, so didn't get to play in the major venues. But yeah, I did play my high school football in Texas, and I think Texas is the best high school football state too. So
yes,
I'm looking forward to eventually getting out to Texas. I didn't get a chance to go to Baylor last year, but I'm excited to see these new rivalries in the Big 12 crafted, and would love to make it out there in the near future. So I am a big Texas fan in general, just of the state itself.
All right. Yeah, not a university of, but yes, I get you.
Orange down here, baby.
Yes, sir. Always and forever. It's at JT Wistricll on Twitter, X, and Locked On Utes on Utah or on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. So at least I could send them your way. If and when Utah loses a game, they could throw some of the receipts back at you, because a view is a view and a comment is a comment. So JT, they could follow you there, right? Did I get that right?
Yep, you got it all right. And hey, I've talked a lot about what I think this Utah team is capable of. And if they don't live up to it, I deserve it. So feel free to clip these, send them my way. How about this, JT? What happened here? What happened here? So I love this time of year, preseason. We're all making predictions. The season's almost here. I can't wait to get it rolling. Utah's in the Big 12. It's going to be a fantastic football season. Cam, it was great jumping on with you.
Thanks for being on with me, JT. Really appreciate it. Special thanks to you. We look forward to that game on September 7th.
Almost less than a month away. Actually,
yes.
At the time we're releasing this, it is a month away.
Yes. So give me a game prediction down in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. You can follow us on Twitter at Locked On Baylor. Find us here on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you again to JT.